Good morning, church.
Morning.
There is a canal called Canal St. Martin. This is a picture of it. It was ordered construction by Napoleon in 1802, and it has served to supply fresh water, fountains, various goods and materials arriving by boat to the city of Paris. And it's still used nowadays for many things, although not as much for commercial business use. But it is a large attraction for tourists to come. People who live in Paris often sit in many of the cafes and enjoy the scenic view of it. Let's go to the next picture. Next one after that. I mean, you see all the people sitting along the edge. There's some bridges that go over it. I mean, a very scenic view. And then every 10 to 15 years or so, this canal gets drained, and they clean it up. Let's go to the next picture here. There's a night view. Next one. So they have a series of locks and dams that they move the gates in, and they start draining all the water in it. And there's a process of cleaning. They take out all the fish. Let's go to the next one. So you got guys that get on waders and they get nets and they go walking through and they scoop up all the fish and they take them to the other side so the fish don't die. And in the process of cleaning, there is a lot of garbage that gets found. Let's go to the next picture. Bicycles. 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 So you can imagine that people are, they park along the edge, and then every once in a while you move the wrong way or you don't get the kickstand set, and bloop, and your bike goes. Now, if it's an inexpensive bicycle, are you going to pay somebody to go dredge it out? It's like 20 feet down there, and apparently they get left. Let's go to the next picture. There's a lot of beer cans, wine bottles. Next one. Shopping carts. What do you do when you're at the store and you load all your groceries in and you look around for one of those little areas? Oh, it's so far away, let me just shove it in the canal. Next one. Mopeds. They said apparently little mopeds will get stolen and then they get abandoned and dumped into the canal so you can't find them. Next one. Next one. So once they get all the garbage taken out, then they gotta get all just the dirt. And so there's tractors that they go through, they get all this junk out. Next one. And then eventually, after all the cleaning is done, what do? They fill it back up with water, and you have this beautiful scene again, where people can go and they can sit next to the cafe, and they can take selfies and enjoy the beautiful surroundings. Now, once the water's back in, it looks the exact same as it did before. But before, there was something beneath the surface. It was beautiful on the outside, but disgusting on the inside. And that is a theme that pops up time and time again in Scripture, is that the beautiful exterior covers up a nasty interior. Let's look at the Gospel of Matthew. Go ahead and turn to Matthew chapter 23. Let's read a few verses when Jesus criticized the Pharisees. In Matthew chapter 23, there are a series of woes. We call them, woe to you. This is kind of one of those you might hear in old-time movies or ghosts offering warnings. Beware who passes here. These are warnings that Jesus gives to the Pharisees, and there's 7 of them. But in verse 27, listen to what Jesus says. He says, "Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You are like whitewashed tombs, which look beautiful on the outside, but on the inside are full of the bones of the dead and everything unclean. In the same way, on the outside, you appear to be as people righteous, but on the inside, you're full of hypocrisy and wickedness. So you see that theme? Beautiful on the outside, but nasty on the inside. So what's a whitewashed tomb? A whitewashed tomb might be a tomb that has been bleached in some manner or fashion, maybe painted white. We like our grave sites, we put flowers on them to make them look beautiful. We want them to look nice, something to designate them as this is a place where a loved one was laid. And so it looks beautiful. But every single grave, no matter what the outside looks like, what's on the inside? Bones. A dead body. And now this, what Jesus says to the Pharisees, would have been a slap in the face, because they were all about being and appearing clean. So you got to say the right things, you got to do the right things, go to the right places. And so they followed the law perfectly because they wanted to look good. On the outside, they wanted to be righteous. And so in the Old Testament, though, if you touched a dead body, you were considered unclean until a certain amount of time passed, or you did a certain amount of things to make you ceremonially clean again. I mean, you've all pulled out a dish that's been in the cabinet before, and you pull it out and there's still food stuck on it. Do you use that dish? Now, what do you do with it? You put it in the sink. Because I can tell you, you don't want to eat off of that old stuff in there. It's unclean. And so for the Pharisees, this would have been a big slap in the face. He said, oh yeah, you look good, but on the inside you're dead bones. Meaning, you are unclean. You appear righteous. You appear holy. Yeah, you're saying all the right things. You're doing the right things. You're going to the right places. But your inside, it's just filth. It's dead man's bones. You are spiritually dead. And so that is the critique. And that's what I want us to consider today, is that the outside may be simply a beautiful veneer to cover up the inside. And when Jesus talks about his famous Sermon on the Mount, and what he's doing there is describing the law and saying that the law is basically kind of like a mirror. The Old Testament law is a mirror to show you how much you actually need God in your life. So there's these things that we're supposed to do, but it really is impossible for us to do all the time. It's to help show us that we have mistakes. It's to help show us that we have sin. It's to help show us that we need God. It's to show that sometimes our inside is full of nastiness, and that's what God cleans and takes away. So I want us to consider that today. And what does this process look like? God is part of this process, but also we are a big part of the process of cleaning our inside so that we're not hypocrites. Because we can look good on the outside, but what is our inside? What does our heart say? What are the thoughts that we have? How do we go about doing this? So the first thing, you have to expose the filth. When they drained the water, that was the very first thing. You drain the water, and then you look over the edge and go, ugh. Because the filth has been exposed. I'm going to read from Ephesians chapter 5, verses 11 through 13. Ephesians chapter 5, verses 11 through 13 says, "Have nothing to do with the fruitless deeds of darkness, but rather expose them. It is shameful even to mention what the disobedient do in secret, but everything exposed by the light becomes visible." So that water gets drained, and then the nastiness gets exposed. And every time they do this, again, every 10 to 15 years or so, you get the nastiness accumulates. There are always onlookers who are there to see, what are these things that get found? And sometimes there have been gold coins found. Sometimes there are cell phones that get found. All kinds of stuff gets discovered in this. But if it has been sitting there, it's got filth stacked upon it, it is rusted, and it just becomes nastiness. What Ephesians here says, expose the fruitless deeds. And so that's the first step that we have to do, is that the nastiness in our life has to be exposed. And the reality of it, some of us are really good at hiding that nastiness. But the reality is that it will get exposed. One of three things will happen. Number one, you'll get caught. And so somebody else exposes your nastiness. Anybody want that to happen? No. Nobody wants that to happen. But one of three things. Somebody else will expose your nastiness. You will get caught. Or, second thing, it will be exposed on Judgment Day. Maybe we hide it for this whole life, but on Judgment Day, it will be exposed. And at that point, it's too late. Somebody else will expose it, God will expose it, or, third option, what's the third option? You expose it yourself. In faith, we call this confession. So somebody else will expose it, God will expose it, or you will expose it. We confess our sins. We confess our troubles. And it doesn't feel good. Nobody wants to say, I'm messed up. I made a mistake. Yet that is what confession is that we come to somebody and we admit our mistakes. We admit our mess. We say, I have this problem. And you own it. And so, I want to encourage you, whether it is with a trusted individual, a spouse, a couple close friends, minister at church. I know one. I'm good at keeping secrets. Elders, sometimes even at the front of the church. Confess your sin. Expose that. Get it out in the open. Let the light shine on it. And if it is a public sin, it needs to be a public confession. The only thing that happens when there's a public sin that doesn't get confessed is that it creates talk. Did you hear about? Do you know about? And if it never gets confessed, that person, they may stand up and they may have good words to say, but if they have not confessed their sin, it undercuts the ministry. So a public sin, public confession. If it's a private sin, a private confession. If I call John a big bad name, I probably need to go talk to John and say, that was my bad. I shouldn't have done that. That's between him and I repair that. I confess my mistakes. So the first thing we do is we confess, we expose the filth. Second thing, we remove the filth. So once the canal was drained, all of that stuff gets exposed. You got to go into the mess, and what do? Take the mess out. You got to remove the filth. Colossians chapter 3 words it this way. Colossians chapter 3, verses 7 and 8. Colossians 3, verse 7 and 8 says, you used to walk in these ways in the life you once lived. But now you must also rid yourselves of all such things as these: anger, rage, malice, slander, and filthy language from your lips. Do not lie to each other, since you have taken off your old self with its practices and have put on the new self, which is being renewed in knowledge and in the image of his Creator. So what do you got to do? You got to rid yourself of all the mess. Some of the examples that he gives here: rid yourself of anger, of malice, of filthy language. You got to get rid of that stuff. Expose it, confess it, and get rid of it. Now, I'm not sure which one of these is more painful, because we really like to hold on to junk. We really like to hold on to junk, whether it's spiritual junk or physical junk. This is where, as I was working on this sermon this week, I kind of had an ouch moment at this. I've always joked with Lisa, it's like, I gotta have a junk drawer. I don't care where the junk drawer is, but I need a junk drawer. And then I defend my junk drawer by saying, well, it's just odds and ends of things that really don't have their own place, and so this becomes their place. And the irony is that I call it my junk drawer. And so I thought, you know what, I need to probably sit down this week and go through my junk drawer, because there's a lot of junk in it that I don't need. I tell myself that I need it, or I might need it someday, but I don't. But we like our junk. Sometimes we even have an extra storage place because our 3,000 square foot house is not big enough for all of our junk. So we have a place to store our junk. We also do the same thing spiritually. It hurts to get rid of all that junk. We might need it someday. It feels good. It's comforting to know that in my junk shed, I have stuff that I might need someday. But we hang on to our spiritual junk also. So does it hurt more to expose the junk or to get rid of the junk? I don't know. It might just depend on your personality. But getting rid of it means we have to let go of things that sometimes we have held on to for a long time. Sometimes that thing is rusted in place inside of our life. Sometimes that thing has had piles of other stuff put on it. And so we have to break it loose to get rid of it. And when you break it loose, then other stuff starts falling apart, and it hurts. So the first thing, expose the mess, expose the filth. Second thing, get rid of the filth. Cut it loose. You don't need it. Third thing, where are we at? Remove the filth. All right. Next thing we have to do, we have to clean ourselves. We have to get washed. Once you've removed that, you saw the tractor going in and it was just taking out all the dirt. You got to wash the insides. Matthew chapter 12, verse 43, Jesus tells this, he gives an example of this. He talks about unclean spirits. And he says, say one of you has an unclean spirit inside of him. And that unclean spirit gets cast out. Well, then you go, and then you clean your insides. What do we talk about? The inside gets all clean, gets put back together. Gets put back together, and then you'll have the spirit who goes wandering around, and he returns, and he finds it all clean, and he calls more of his friends. Chapter 12, Matthew chapter 12, verse 43. When an impure spirit comes out of a person, it goes through in arid places seeking rest and does not find it. And then it says, I will return to the house I left. And when it arrives, it finds the house unoccupied, swept clean, and put in order. And then it goes and it takes with it 7 other spirits more wicked than itself, and they go in and they live there. And the final condition of that person is worse than before. That is how it will be with this wicked generation. So there's a danger here